There was a phone call. Not from him. Not from someone I recognized. Just a voice. Low. Female. Precise. Speaking in Korean so clean and cold it felt like a blade pressed against my ear. She said, "I know about the children." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My twins were asleep in the next room, and I stood there in my kitchen in the dark, holding the phone like it was a grenade, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to pray. She had done a DNA test. Somehow. I still don't know how. She had matched it to Hyunwoo, and she had matched it to my sons. I want to tell you what happened from the beginning. I want you to understand how I got here, how a woman like me, a careful woman, a quiet woman, ended up standing in a kitchen in Africa at 2 a.m, trembling over a phone call from the wife of the man I once loved. Because here is what nobody tells you about loving a dangerous man. The danger never stays in Seoul. It follows you home. How do you survive when the secret you've been protecting for years is finally exposed? Not by him, but by her. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I was not a foolish girl. I want to say that clearly, because when people hear a story like mine, they immediately picture someone naive, someone young and blinded and desperate for love. And I was young. Yes. I was 26 years old when I arrived in Seoul on a work contract, fresh out of a translation program in Nairobi, carrying 2 suitcases and a confidence I'd spent years building inside myself. I spoke 4 languages. I had worked hard for every opportunity I'd ever been given. I knew what I wanted my life to look like. I had plans. Hyunwoo was not part of any of them. I met him at a corporate function, one of those polished events where the wine costs more than my monthly rent, and everyone smiles with only half their face. I had been brought in as an interpreter for a business negotiation. I was good at my job. I kept my eyes on the papers and my voice steady, and I did not let myself be distracted. But then I looked up, and he was already looking at me. He wasn't the loudest man in the room. That was what caught me first. Most powerful men perform their power. They laugh too hard, they stand too wide, they need you to notice them. Hyunwoo was still, quiet in a way that made the noise around him feel irrelevant. He wore a dark suit. He had eyes that seemed to be calculating something at all times, and yet when those eyes landed on me, all that calculation went soft. Just for a moment. Just enough. I looked away. I finished my job. I left. He found me the next morning at the cafe near my apartment. I still don't know how he knew where I lived. At the time, I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself a lot of things about Hyunwoo in those early weeks that I later had to unlearn. He asked if he could sit with me. I said yes. He ordered tea he barely touched, and for an hour he just talked to me. Really talked. Asked me questions about Nairobi, about languages, about what I loved, about what I was afraid of. He listened in a way that felt almost violent, the kind of listening that makes you feel seen so completely that it becomes uncomfortable. I told him too much. I knew it even as I was doing it. I want to be honest with you. The first month I kept my distance. I was professional. We had coffee twice, a dinner once. He never pushed. He never rushed. He was patient in a way that I now understand was deliberate. Hyunwoo was a man who understood that the most valuable things require time and precision. By the second month, I was in love with him. It crept up on me the way deep water does. You don't realize how far from shore you've drifted until you turn around and can't see land anymore. He was kind to me. Quietly. Consistently kind. He brought me small things. A translation dictionary he had hunted down in 3 bookshops. A scarf in a color I had mentioned once in passing. He remembered everything I said. He made me feel like I was the most interesting person in any room we shared. He also, I noticed, never took me to certain places. Never introduced me to anyone from his life. Our world was always small. Intimate dinners, quiet corners, his private car, a residence that I now understand was one of several he kept for different versions of himself. I asked him once, somewhere in the 3rd month, why he was so private. He said, "Because what I feel for you is mine." and I don't share what is mine. I thought it was romantic. I was so wrong. The first time I truly understood the shape of his world, I was in his car when two men on motorcycles approached us at a red light, and one of them raised something toward the window. In seconds, Hyunwoo's driver had floored the accelerator, and three large men I'd barely noticed were suddenly very visible, positioned around the car with a focus that was absolutely not bodyguard level. I sat frozen. Hyunwoo put his hand over mine and said very calmly, "Don't be afraid." "Who were those men?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "People who misunderstand the nature of consequences." He didn't explain more. And God help me, I didn't push. I told myself the world of a powerful businessman sometimes attracted threats. I told myself danger circled powerful men like weather. I told myself I could love him carefully, from a managed distance, and be safe. But there is no safe distance from a man like Hyunwoo. He was not a businessman with inconvenient enemies. He ran an organization that moved in the shadows of Seoul's most glamorous districts, in the space between legitimate empire and something far darker. I found out piece by piece, the way you find out things you've been unconsciously avoiding. A name mentioned in a news article. A look his men exchanged when I asked the wrong question. A conversation I wasn't supposed to hear through a door I hadn't knocked on yet. By the time I fully understood what he was, I was already too deep to surface without pain. And still, I want you to understand this. I loved him. Not the violence. Not the fear. Not the empire. I loved the man who sat across from me in the early morning and asked me what words felt like in different languages. The man who fell asleep with my head on his shoulder and looked in sleep, like someone who had never hurt anyone. I loved who he was in the space he created just for me. That was the most dangerous place I ever lived. That night, lying awake in the apartment he had quietly moved me into without asking, I heard voices in the hallway. Men speaking in low, clipped Korean I was not supposed to understand. But I did understand. I was a translator after all. One of them said, "She doesn't know about the wife." I stopped breathing. I lay there in the dark, perfectly still. And I understood that the version of my life I had been building inside my chest was already over. I just didn't know yet how much worse it was about to become. I want to tell you about the morning I found out. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were the days I allowed myself the small luxury of sleeping past 6. I had a later shift at the translation firm, and I had planned nothing special. Just a slow morning, a good breakfast, maybe a walk along the Han River before work. I did not plan to have my entire life restructured before 8 a.m. I had been feeling unwell for almost 3 weeks. Nothing dramatic. A bone-deep tiredness that no amount of sleep touched. A sensitivity to smells that made the cafe downstairs suddenly unbearable. A nausea that arrived every morning like an unwelcome guest, and lingered until midday. I had told myself it was stress. I had told myself it was the change in climate. I had told myself many things. I had not told myself the truth. I bought the test from a pharmacy 2 streets away from my apartment, walking quickly, hood up, as if someone were watching. Maybe that instinct had already arrived before the knowing did. I did the test alone. In a small bathroom with white tiles and a window that looked out onto a gray Seoul sky, I watched the lines appear. 2 lines. I sat on the edge of the bathtub for a long time after that. I don't know exactly how long. Long enough for the morning light to shift. Long enough for the nausea to return quietly, as if to confirm what I was looking at. Pregnant. The word had no sound at first. It just sat inside me, enormous and still, like something that had always been there and was only now making itself known. My first feeling was not joy. I want to be honest with you. My first feeling was a fear so absolute, it had no name. A fear that understood everything I did not yet fully know, that already sensed the geography of what this meant in a life like mine, with a man like Hyunwoo. I did not call him that morning. I sat with it alone, the way you sometimes have to sit with the most important moments of your life before you share them. I made tea, I didn't drink. I stood at the window and watched Seoul moving below me. All those lives in motion. none of them knowing what had just happened inside my small apartment. I thought about my mother. I thought about Nairobi. I thought about what I had believed my future would look like at 26. Then I called my doctor. I was 6 weeks along, which meant the pregnancy had announced itself early, had made itself known before I was ready to know. And then, the part that I still cannot explain without my voice breaking, the doctor looked at her screen and said carefully, "There appear to be 2 sacs, Ms. Zola. I'd like to do another scan to confirm, but it looks like you may be carrying twins." Twins. The word hit me differently from the first. This one had weight and sound, an enormous, terrifying consequence. I pressed my hand flat against my stomach, still flat, impossibly ordinary looking. And I thought, 2. There are 2 of them. 2 heartbeats I was now responsible for. 2 lives that would need me completely. I told Hyunwoo that evening. I had planned to be calm. I had rehearsed a version of the conversation that was measured and adult, and did not ask for anything specific, just the truth of what he wanted to do. But when I sat across from him in that quiet room of his, with the city glittering below us, and I looked at his face, all my rehearsed calm dissolved. "I'm pregnant," I said. "Twins." He went very still. That stillness I had once loved in him, the stillness that had made him seem powerful and certain, now frightened me, because in it, I couldn't read anything. Not joy, not fear, not love, just calculation. The thing behind his eyes that was always calculating, recalibrating, assessing consequence. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes." Silence. "Zola." He said my name slowly. "There are things about my life that you don't fully understand." "I understand enough," I said, and I heard my own voice, harder than I expected. "My situation is complicated," he said. "Tell me about your wife," I said. The silence this time was different, heavier. He looked at me for a long time, and then he said, "Her name is Soyeon. We married 8 years ago. It is not what you are imagining. She is from a family aligned with mine. The marriage is a structure, not a choice." "Is she real?" I asked. "Yes." "Then she is everything." I stood up. He stood too, fast, moving around the table before I could reach the door. He held my face in both his hands, the way he used to when he wanted me to see that he meant what he was about to say. "Those children are mine," he said. "I will not abandon them." "And me?" I asked. He didn't answer fast enough. That silence, that half-second of delay, told me everything I needed to know about what I was to him. 3 days later, one of his lieutenants came to my apartment while Hyunwoo was away. A man I had seen before but never spoken to directly. He stood in my doorway and said, without hostility but without warmth, "Mr. Hyunwoo thinks it would be best for you to return home, for your safety and for the safety of the children." "He sent you to say this?" "He thinks it is the safest option. He will make sure you and the children are provided for. But Seoul is not safe for you right now. There are people who have noticed your presence in his life. People who would use you." I understood what he was not saying directly. I was a risk. I was a liability in the architecture of Hyunwoo's world. His wife's family, who had their own power, their own reach, could not know. No one could know. I was being asked to disappear, quietly, gracefully, with financial compensation. I closed the door without answering. And that night, while Hyunwoo's city glittered outside my window, I sat on the floor of my apartment and held my own stomach and talked to my twins. Softly. In Swahili first, then English. I told them I was going to protect them. I told them no matter what happened next, they were loved. I told them I was going to find a way out. What I did not tell them, what I barely allowed myself to think, was how terrified I was. Because I knew now what Hyunwoo was. I knew what his world was capable of. And I knew that if his wife's family ever discovered that I existed, that there were 2 boys somewhere in the world carrying Hyunwoo's name in their blood, the danger would not stop with me. It would come for my sons. I spent 3 nights planning, buying nothing, searching nothing on my phone, writing everything in a notebook with a pen. The old way, the untraceable way. On the fourth morning, I deleted every photograph, every message, every trace of who I had been in that apartment with him. I packed one bag. I looked at Seoul for the last time through the window of my apartment, and I whispered goodbye to something I could not name. And somewhere across the city, in a house I had never been allowed to enter, a woman named Soyeon was already beginning to ask questions that nobody had given her answers to yet. I didn't know that then. I wish I had. The airport was the most frightened I have ever been in my life. Not giving birth. Not the confrontations that came later. Not even the phone call. The airport, Incheon, 3 a.m, my one bag on my shoulder and 2 sons sleeping inside my body. That was the moment I understood what survival actually costs. I had booked the ticket under a different routing than my usual one. Not straight to Nairobi. I went through 2 layovers.
If you're listening to this right now, it's because this story has already pulled you in a little. But what you're hearing here is just a part of it. The full version includes 30 complete stories, no cuts. No ads, just the audio flowing while you listen. The QR code is on your screen now, or the link is pinned in the queue.
Added nearly 14 hours to my journey. Paid more than I should have, because I did not want a direct, traceable line from Seoul to my mother's house. I was not being paranoid. I was being precise. I had learned that much from Hyunwoo, at least. Precision. At check-in, my hands trembled. I gripped the counter and made my hands still by force. The woman behind the desk asked me the standard questions. I answered them in a voice that belonged to a version of me that was not afraid. As I walked toward the departure gates, I passed through a corridor lined with glass, and I saw my own reflection. This tall, dark woman in a gray coat, stomach not yet showing at 10 weeks, carrying a secret that could get her killed. I kept walking. On the plane, I could not sleep. I pressed my palm to my lower belly, and I talked to my sons the whole flight, silently, just moving my lips, the way you pray when you're too exhausted for sound. I told them about where we were going. I told them about my mother's house, the smell of her kitchen, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the orange light in the evening. I told them about a life that was slow and warm and nobody's enemy. I told them we were going to be all right. I repeated it until I almost believed it. My mother was waiting at the airport. I had called her from a payphone 2 days before leaving. Another precaution that she found excessive and I found essential. I had told her I was coming home. I had told her I needed her, and that I would explain everything when I arrived. She didn't ask questions. That is the thing about my mother. She has always understood the difference between the moment that needs words and the moment that just needs arms. She held me in that arrivals hall, and I pressed my face into her neck, and I cried for the first time since finding out I was pregnant. I cried for all of it. For Seoul. For the version of my life I had imagined. For the man I had loved, who had sent his employee to ask me to disappear quietly. For my sons, who had done nothing and were already carrying the consequences of choices I had made before they existed. My mother held me and said nothing until I was done. Then she said, "Come, let's go home." I told her everything on the second night. Sitting at the kitchen table, the way we had always had every important conversation in our family. At that table, with tea, in the honest light of the kitchen. I told her about Seoul, about Hyunwoo, about the nature of his world, about the wife named Soyeon who did not know I existed. I told her I was carrying twins. She was quiet for a long time. Her hands were flat on the table. She looked out the window at the dark. Then she said, "No one can know who their father is." "I know," I said. "Not the neighbors, not your aunts, not anyone at the clinic. We will say the father was a man who left. That is a story people accept." "I know." She looked at me then. Really looked. And in her eyes I saw grief and love and fury and acceptance, all layered on top of each other the way geological time layers stone. "Are you safe here?" she asked. "I think so," I said. I covered my tracks. I was careful. "Think is not good enough," she said. "Are you safe?" I looked at my hands. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But this is the safest I can make us." She reached across the table and covered my hands with hers. "Then we protect these children," she said. "Together. Starting now." The months that followed were hard in ways I had not fully anticipated. Pregnancy in hiding is its own particular loneliness. I went to a clinic an hour from my mother's town for all my prenatal appointments, far enough that no one connected me to our neighborhood, close enough that I could manage the journey even as my body grew heavy and slow. The doctor at the clinic was a quiet woman who asked the right questions and kept her own counsel. She saw immediately that I was frightened. She never asked me why. She just took care of me. My twins grew. I watched my body change and tried to see it as miracle rather than evidence, because that's what it felt like sometimes. Like carrying two secrets that were also, impossibly, the most beautiful things that had ever happened to me. I gave birth in that clinic on a rainy November morning. 14 hours of labor. My mother held my hand through all of it, whispering things in our language, prayers, old words, the names of women in our family who had endured greater things than this. My sons arrived at 6:42 and 6:49 in the morning. 2 boys. Dark and Korean both at once. My complexion, my mouth, but with something of Hyunwoo in the architecture of their eyes, in the particular line of their brows. Beautiful in a way that broke me open and rebuilt me simultaneously. I named them myself. No one else had the right. I held them in the early morning light of that clinic room and I made them a promise. The same one I'd made on the plane, but louder now, more anchored, because now they were real and present and breathing and looking at me with these enormous dark eyes that already seemed to be studying the world carefully. I promised them I would never let anyone take them from me. I promised them that no matter what came next, they were mine. I promised them they were safe. I believed that for almost 4 years. 4 years. 4 years of school runs and bedtime stories and birthday cakes, and my sons learning to say mama with the particular authority that only small children have, as if the word itself is both a command and a declaration. 4 years of quiet mornings where I almost forgot what fear tasted like. And then, that Tuesday night, the phone rang. A voice I did not recognize. A Korean woman, speaking precisely, with the kind of calm that belongs to someone who has been sitting on a secret and has finally decided to use it. "I know about the children," she said. And I understood, standing in my dark kitchen, that somewhere across the world, a woman named Soyeon had found the piece of the story that I had worked 4 years to bury. I just didn't know yet what she intended to do with it. I want to tell you what it means to be called barren by the world of a man like Hyunwoo. It is not said cruelly, always. Sometimes it is said the way people say things they believe to be simply true. A clinical fact delivered without malice, as if your body is a document that has been reviewed and found lacking. His mother said it at a family dinner once, 2 years into our marriage. In Korean, I was not supposed to understand well enough to feel. She said, "The African woman cannot give him children. The bloodline needs a solution." I understood every word. I sat at that table and I ate my food and I smiled at the appropriate moments and I did not let a single thing cross my face. That was the discipline of being Hyunwoo's wife. You learn to feel everything privately. We had married 3 years before I fled to Africa. Not the romantic soul courtship I had described to you. That part was real, yes, every word of it. But what I had not told you yet, what I left out because I needed you to understand who I was before I became who I am, is that Hyunwoo eventually chose me. He chose me over the arrangement, over his family's objections, over the complicated machinery of his world that wanted him aligned with someone else. He chose me. I believed that meant something permanent. What I did not know, what I was not told until much later, was that choosing me had not stopped him from also choosing someone else. Her name was Mirai. She was Korean, beautiful, connected to a family on the edge of Hyunwoo's world. She appeared in his life quietly, the way all the most dangerous things do, without announcement, without drama. inserting herself into the spaces that my absence created whenever Hyunwoo's world required me to disappear from view. I found out about Mirai the way wives always find out. Not from their husbands. From a silence that becomes too perfectly maintained. From a phone left face down one too many times. From a name mentioned once in passing by one of the men, corrected immediately. The correction itself a confirmation. I confronted Hyunwoo. He did not deny her. That, I will say for him. He never denied anything when I asked directly. He said it was complicated. He said it was not what I thought. He said Mirai was a situation that had existed before our marriage, and that he had been unable to fully sever. Does she have children? I asked. The pause was half a second too long. She has 2 children, he said. The room shifted. Are they yours? I asked. She says so, he said. I looked at him. And what do you say? He looked away. And in that moment, I understood that Hyunwoo, a man who had built his empire on never being uncertain, was uncertain about this. He had taken Mirai's word. He had accepted it as fact because it had been presented as fact. Because she was Korean and connected, and the children looked Korean, and no one had thought to question her. No one except me. I left for my mother's house in Africa 2 weeks later. I told Hyunwoo I needed time. He let me go. Too easily, which told me his attention was already divided. Mirai was filling the space my absence left, and he was not fighting hard enough to close that distance. I sat in my mother's kitchen again, at that same table, under that same light, and I told my mother what I suspected. Those children are not his, I said. I don't know how I know. I just know. My mother looked at me steadily. Then prove it, she said. That was when I started making calls. Quiet calls, careful ones. I had a friend in Seoul, a woman who had worked in a forensic laboratory and who owed me a debt of the kind that cannot be repaid with money. I told her what I needed. I told her how delicate it was. I told her that if this ever surfaced before I was ready, my life was over. She understood. She moved carefully. She was brilliant. It took 11 weeks. 11 weeks of waiting, in my mother's house, sleeping in my childhood room, walking the streets of my hometown in the early mornings, and trying to breathe through the uncertainty of everything my life had become. And then, in the 12th week, I discovered something I had not been looking for at all. I discovered that I was pregnant. I sat on the floor of my mother's bathroom, on those same white tiles, holding a test that should not have been possible according to every doctor who had ever looked at my results, and said, gently but firmly, that pregnancy was unlikely for me, that my body was complicated, that the word infertile might be too strong, but that hope should be measured carefully. I was pregnant. Unmistakably, undeniably, miraculously pregnant. I pressed both hands against my stomach, and I laughed, and then I cried.
Maybe you're listening to this while doing something simple. Washing dishes, tidying up, trying to relax. And that's exactly why these stories work. When you unlock full access, you get 30 stories. Over 30 hours of audio with no interruptions. You press play, and the story just keeps going. If you want to continue right now, scan the QR code on your SC, or tap the link in the pinned comment. What was never said continues there.
And then I laughed again, alone on that bathroom floor, at the absolute absurdity of what my body had decided to do in the middle of the most complicated year of my life. The woman they called barren. The woman his family had written off as a biological dead end. The woman Mirai had been quietly positioning herself to replace. I was pregnant with Hyunwoo's child. And in Seoul, my friend was already packaging the results of the DNA test I had waited 11 weeks for. The results that would change everything. My friend sent the results in an encrypted file with a single message. You were right. They are not his. Neither of them. I read those words 3 times, 4 times. I let them settle into my body the way cold water settles. Slowly, completely, reaching every part of you. Mirai had spent years building a life on a lie that my husband had believed because he had not thought to question it. A lie that his family had accepted because it was convenient. A lie that had been slowly, quietly, dismantling my marriage from the inside. I held my stomach. I held the results. And I understood that the time for silence was over. I was going back to Seoul, and this time I was bringing everything. I did not come back to Seoul quietly. I walked through that front door in the coat Hyunwoo bought me, wearing his mother's earrings, carrying one envelope that contained everything. He was in the study. He looked up and I saw relief and guilt cross his face simultaneously. "We need to talk," I said. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed had weight. I placed the DNA results on his desk before he could speak. He opened them slowly. I watched his face as he read, watched something he had believed for years collapse quietly behind his eyes. "Neither of them are mine," he said. "Neither," I confirmed. Mireille arrived within the hour, confident, composed. Then she saw me. Her composure fractured at the edges. Faced with the documents, she could not deny what she had built on a lie for years. Hyunwoo asked her to leave. Then he crossed the room and placed his hand against my stomach. Gently, like a man rediscovering something he'd lost. "Is it ours?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. "And you don't need a test to prove it." His forehead came down to mine, and for the first time in months, I breathed. That night, I lay awake beside him thinking about everything it had cost to walk back through that door. The truth was won. But in his world, truth is never the end. It is always just the beginning of the next storm. Our son was born on a Sunday morning. Small, perfect, with my nose and Hyunwoo's eyes. A face that made every painful chapter feel, somehow worth the cost. Hyunwoo was there. He held his son for the first time with hands that, for once, did not know what to do with themselves. This man who commanded entire rooms, who never showed uncertainty, standing there with our newborn pressed against his chest, completely undone. I watched him and thought, this is who you could have always been. Rebuilding our marriage was not easy. It was not a single moment of forgiveness. It was a daily decision. Every morning, choosing to stay, choosing to try, choosing the future over the wound. He made changes, real ones. The shadows of his world grew smaller. He chose us, loudly, consistently, in ways that cost him something. And I, the woman they called barren, had given him his only true heir, not through luck, through survival, through a strength I didn't know I had until the moment I needed it most. My son doesn't know this story yet. One day he will, and I will tell him exactly as I have told you. Honestly, painfully, completely, because he deserves to know what his mother survived to bring him into this world. Some nights I still wake up and reach for that envelope in my memory, the one I carried across the world to prove what was true. People called me barren, replaceable, a wife who had failed at the most basic thing. But I was the one still standing when the lie finally fell. I don't tell you this for sympathy. I tell you this because somewhere out there, a woman is being told she is not enough. And I need her to know that the ones they underestimate always carry the most dangerous kind of strength. Do you believe a woman can survive being betrayed by the person she loved most and still choose love again? And if you were in my place, would you have walked back through that door? Or would you have stayed gone forever?